Hello everyone, Simon here. Welcome back to learning Unreal Engine 4. So today we're going to look at materials and maybe a bit of lighting. So this is a sample map called Realistic Rendering. You can download this stuff from the internet. Hold on. In fact, this one is probably just here. So in our Unreal Engine launcher, if you just, well, it was here. It was here. You just scroll down. Maybe it's learn. Lagging for some reason. Anyway, here we go. So in learn, you just scroll down. There it is, this one, realistic rendering. Although we can also learn stuff like stylized rendering, sun tempo, elemental demo. So there's a bunch of demos that we can. Reflections, nice. That's a lot of reflections. All right, so you can learn all this stuff and you can download the maps and text it out. So we're gonna load the realistic lighting sample. And while that is loading, I would like to read about materials. Maybe we should... Alright, let's just start reading, right? Alright, material inputs. This is the important stuff. I was looking at this briefly. We're skipping the basic concepts, like how to use the interface. I think this is fairly self-explanatory. Like you have, colors, and then you have nodes. You multiply the color but with the texture, and then you're gonna add that together to get the base color. I think this is fairly self-explanatory. This is oh, I see. So this is the alpha channel. So the full. All right, cool. So that's the thing. Let me get back to here. How does that work? So this is the color. The alpha channel multiplied by that color, this alpha channel multiplied by this color, add to that, and that becomes the base color. Right. Or is it? Texture sample. I'm not sure. Anyway. So the interface is easy enough. You just kind of put things into other things. You slot things into things. So we're gonna skip over the texture or the materials interface. Where's the ArcViz materials? Oh, look at all this stuff. So if we just double click some of this stuff. Wow, hey, look at all these textures. Cool. So there's something simple like tiles. So zoom out a little bit. That's a lot. That's a lot of stuff to put into. The texture sample is just pink. Oh no, it's not just pink. It's a grid. All right. So there's a grid. They take the grid, put it into diffuse. So there's the brown color. And then color seam, texture sample. Not sure what LERP stands for. The line interpolate. Oh, I see. Let's line interpolate. In expression blends between two input values based on a third input value used as a mask. This can be thought of as a mask to define transitions between two textures, like a layer mask in Photoshop. The intensity of the mask alpha determines the ratio of color to take from two input values. Right. If alpha is 00 black, the first input is used. If alpha is 1 white, the second input is used. If alpha is gray, somewhere between 0 and 1, the output is a blend between the two inputs. Keep in mind that the blend happens per channel. So if alpha is an RGB color, alpha's red channel value defines the blend between A and B's red channels independently of the alpha's green channel, which defines the blend between A and B's green channels. Line interpolate. I don't know why it's called LERP though. It's alright, well, a LERP is a line interpolate. So let's see, we're interpolating between these two colors based on this alpha. So you can see that when it's done, you will have brown squares and then gray lines in between, because there's brown and there's gray, and then depending on the alpha channel of the grid, it puts in either brown or gray. That's how you get the tiles. Right, I see. I see. And the texture sample, this is just white. So it multiplies by white as well. Or I mean, it's not white, it's kind of a light gray. And then that multiplies by the blue channel of this. And that becomes the diffuse color. Right. Alright, well let's read. Let's read about materials, right? Material inputs. Here we take a look at the available inputs when making a material. By feeding values by way of constants, parameters, and textures into these inputs, you can define just about any physical surface you can imagine. Just about. Not all inputs are used with every combination of blend mode and shading model. As such, we will designate when each input is available for use so that you know which inputs are used in which type of material you create. Right. Inputs and material settings. Not all inputs will be useful for every type of material you create. For example, when developing a light function, a material that is applied to a light, you can only use the emissive color input on the material and nothing else, since other inputs such as metallic or roughness would not be applicable. Because of this, it is important to know what type of material you're creating before you start worrying too much about inputs. The three primary controlling properties in this are blend mode. This controls how your material will blend in with the text pixels behind it. Shading model. This defines how light is calculated for the surface of the material. Material domain. This controls how the material is intended to be used, such as whether it is meant to be part of a surface, a light function, or a post-process material. Fortunately, Unreal Engine 4 removes the guesswork for which inputs you need for a given type of material. As you change these settings in the material, you'll notice that your available inputs will update and inputs that you do not need will be disabled. Alright. Right, base color. Base color simply defines the overall color of the material. It takes in a vector 3 RGB value, and each channel is automatically clamped between 0 and 1. Right. If taken from the real world, this is the color when photographed using a polarizing filter. Polarization removes the specular of nonmetals when aligned. Right. Right, so this is just the diffuse color, basically. Metallic. The metallic input literally controls how metal-like your surface will be. Non-metals have metallic values of 0, metals have metallic values of 1. For pure surfaces, such as pure metal, pure stone, pure plastic, etc., this value will be 0 or 1, not anything in between. Pure plastic, pure stone, 0 or 1. When creating hybrid surfaces like corroded, dusty, or rusty metals, you may find that you need some value between 0 and 1. Wouldn't you use like a map? Or would you not use a map? I don't know. How metal-like your surface will be. We need to test this stuff in Engine. Specular. The specular input should not be connected and left as its default value of 0.5 for most cases. It is value between 0 and 1 and is used to scale the current amount of specularity on non-metallic surfaces. It has no effect on metals. Okay. So if your metal is 1, then it's just metal. If your metal is 0, then your specular decides how shiny it is. It has no effect on metals, on non-metallic surfaces. But you can put a specular map on it, can't you? So you can, if you have a specular map, then some parts will be shinier than others. So if you imagine, what's a good example? If you imagine like let's say a book, right? A book. can you see this roots? So a book. So this book is slightly shiny. You can kind of see the reflection. I'm doing this to show you the reflection of the computer screen on the surface. So the outside of it is shiny. So the specular on it would be more than half, I think. But then this side, where the pages are, it's not specular. So then if you have a specular map, so if you have one texture over the whole rectangle of the book, then these parts would have specular on it, and then these parts, because that's the paper, would not. So I think you can put a specular map on it to define like some parts of the object has specular and some parts do not. Roughness. The roughness input literally controls how rough the material is. A rough material will scatter reflected light in more directions than a smooth material. This can be seen in how blurry or sharp the reflection is, or how broad or tight the specular highlight is. Roughness of 0 smooth is a mirror reflection, and a roughness of 1 rough is completely matte or diffuse. Roughness is a property that will frequently be mapped on your objects in order to add the most physical variation to the surface. Well, I was just talking about a specular map, but maybe it should be a roughness map. Would it be a roughness map? Or would it also be a specular map? No, it would also be a specular map because the paper has a different specular than the cover. I'm talking about the book again. We should probably also look at this stuff too. So this takes that and then adds blue behind the white to become the base color. This is just purely metal with 0.2 roughness on a yellow box. And the yellow box is kind of reflecting a skybox, which you can't see. But you can see it in the reflection. You see the blue there. It's reflecting something. The specular map here is 0 roughness, 0 metal, 1 specular. I'm not sure about the specular on this model. But the roughness here, they've put a cloud texture. What on earth? Why would you lerp this? They're interpolating between 0 and 1, alpha 0.55, and then adding that to B. But you're interpolating between 2 numbers. You're not interpolating between 2 textures. So this is just... Isn't this just 0.1? If it's 0.55 of the way between -1 and 1, that's just 0.1, isn't it? What? How is that? Why would you do this? And then you add this, and you add 0.1, and you clamp that between 0 and 1. But what? Okay, I can understand this part. I don't understand why you would lerp between -1 and 1 with 0.55. This seems completely redundant to me, unless I'm reading lerp wrong. No, I'm not reading lerp wrong. This is just redundant. It should just be a constant 0.1 into here. I mean, unless they're truncating this, and unless there's like other textures behind here that you can add, and they've taken them out and just replaced them with constants to make it simpler. I don't. Anyway, base color is the yellow. Metallic is metallic, and then roughness is the cloud texture, and so it varies between rough and smooth clouds, right? This, I swear, this is redundant. Anyway, emissive color, I like this. So the entire texture could just glow. Here they've multiplied the that with that, so that the white bits become the yellow bits. And then they've taken this and emissive brightness 6. So it's 6 times brightness. So they take that and then multiply it by 6 and then put on the emissive color, and it becomes a really brightly glowing yellow. Emissive color. The emissive color input controls which parts of your material will appear to glow because they are emitting light. Ideally, this will receive a masked texture, mostly black except in the areas that need to glow. Values greater than 1 are allowed as HDR lighting is supported. But couldn't you just make the entire object glow? Like, what if you just want a glowing cube? Or like, you know, just a glowing thing. Wouldn't you then have the entire thing glow? Emissive color. Let me just find something with emissive color if I can. I'm not sure if I can. Probably can't actually. Flashlight, desktop lamp, material, no. Nothing. I mean, there's actual lights here. There's no glowy objects in here, so. We have 6 spotlights simulating the skylight. Alright. Also, you see the outdoors, it's just one texture. It's just the texture on the other. They did make railings above and below, though. That's curious. Although you're not meant to go outside, I don't think. Yeah, I don't think you're meant to be able to go outside. Curtains. So there's no glowy things in here, so I don't think we have any emissive colors. Very interesting. Alright, let's get back to reading. Opacity. The opacity input is used with the translucent blend mode. When using the translucent blend mode, it allows you to input a value between 0 and 1, where 0 represents completely transparent and 1 represents fully opaque. Opaque and masked blend modes also use opacity when using one of the subsurface shading models. So only in translucent blend modes. Opacity is mostly used for translucent, additive, and modulated materials. Texture coordinates gives you the UVs for the texture sample. Subtract V gradients from this to give you that. So this is a linear to gradient. So basically they put a gradient on it so that it's darker at the top and lighter at the bottom, right? The linear gradient there. So then they have it so that it kind of disappears at the top. Base color is white. 111 is white. And the opacity is this kind of fading thing, which looks like that at the end. Alright. Opacity mask. Opacity mask is similar to opacity, but it's only available when using the mask blend mode. As with opacity, this takes a value between 0 and 1, but unlike opacity, varying shades of gray are not seen in the result. When in masked mode, a material is either completely visible or completely invisible. This makes it a perfect solution when you need materials that define complex solid surfaces, such as wire meshes, chain link fences, and so on. The opaque portions will still respect lighting. So this allows you a gradient of transparency, translucent blend mode. When using masked blend mode, it's either completely transparent or completely opaque. You can use opacity mask clip value property on the base material node to control the point where the clipping takes place. See the mask blend mode documentation for more details. So the texture sample is a strange. It's a normal map or something. I think it's like a. Oh, that's weird. That's a weird map. But then they mask the channel, and then they apply the opacity mask. So this is kind of overly complex, but they're doing this to show you that the gradient here, you see this gradient? Maybe I shouldn't click it. Never mind. Wait, it's even smaller than before. So the gradient, you see how it goes from black to white there, but when you apply it to the material, there's no gradient here. So they're doing this really complicated thing for no reason. But the complicated thing they're doing shows you that there's no gradients. It's either completely transparent or completely opaque. And you might think, well, why have this instead of just using the same one as this and then making it black and white and then it will do the same thing? Yes, it will do the same thing, but I suspect that this is computationally less intensive than this. So if you use this in places where you would otherwise use this, you would be wasting frame rates. You would be wasting frames. Trying to render a more complex thing when you really can use a simpler thing. I assume that's the case. Because as I said, like this seems to duplicate this functionality, but with less features. Like why would you duplicate functionality but with less features? It's because this is simpler. It's probably much simpler, much less computationally expensive. So you'd use this. And sometimes transparencies lag the game. I remember back in Assassin's Creed 4. It was either Assassin's Creed 4 or Assassin's Creed... what was the one afterwards? 4... What's Black Flag? Assassin's Creed... Rogue? Was that the name of Assassin's Creed Rogue? So there was one Assassin's Creed game where in one part of the game the transparencies lagged, so there was smoke. In one part of the game the smoke lagged like crazy. And then in the other part of the game the smoke didn't lag for some reason. so it was kind of two different versions of the same thing. It was like there's combat and there's explosions and there's smoke. But one of the smoke would lag the computer and the other one wouldn't. And smoke is transparency. And so you might imagine that one version of the smoke is much less computationally complex than the other, and that's why one lagged and the other didn't, right? And another example is if you play EVE Online, the smoke lags. The clouds lag like crazy in EVE Online, even on fast computers. It lags like crazy. And again, it's probably because the transparency model they're using is just unnecessarily complex. Normal mapping. The normal input takes in a normal map, which is used to provide significant physical detail to the first surface by perturbing the normal or facing direction of each individual pixel. So this is a bit arcane if you don't understand it. But basically, for every pixel on the material, the normal map changes its facing direction with regards to the lighting. So like a flat surface, instead of all the pixels kind of pointing out that way, a normal map will make some of them point that way or the other way or down, so that when the light hits it, it looks like it's facing the other way, even though the texture is just flat or the mesh is flat. The normal map makes it look like the pixels are facing in different directions. And so then what you see here in this image is that even though the mesh is flat there, you see like that pixel would be facing that way, and then the pixels on the other edge of it would be facing the other way, so then it looks like there's a crevice or a crack in this X thing, because it's just kind of taking the pixel and then taking the UV map and then telling the lighting to calculate it as though it was facing the other way. And so normal maps were pretty amazing when they were first invented. Amazing in what they achieved, and also amazing in how weird conceptually it was. But once you get used to it, this is not that weird. It's also almost impossible to draw normal maps by hand. They're almost always created from a 3D modeling software. A high resolution, well, it tells you here. In the image above, both weapons are using the same static mesh. The lower one exhibits a highly detailed normal map, which provides tremendous additional detail and gives the illusion that the surface contains many more polygons than are actually being rendered. Such normal maps are often created from high-resolution modeling packages such as Pixel-Logic ZBrush. So there are specific specialized programs that take your 3D model, adds a lot more polygons to it, allow you to tinker with a lot more polygons, and then translate those polygons into a UV map, which you can then apply as a UV map in another program. So it looks much more detailed than it actually is, because you kind of recreate the same, you modify the same object to put in that extra detail, and then you export that as a UV map. And the UV map is this thing down here. They usually look like this, like blue with weird pink and green bits on it, because the RGB is the up, down, and front, and the blue is the front. So most pixels will face forward. So that's why most of it is blue, but then some of them is green and some of them is red and so on and so forth, right? Or is it red? Red is up and then green is side and then blue is front. So some pixels face up into the side, but most pixels face to the front. That's why it's mostly blue. It probably doesn't make any sense to you. Normal map. That's not okay here. So they look like this. They look like this. There you go. And you can kind of imagine what these things are, right? So a brick texture, I guess it's easy to understand. So the brick texture, this kind of blue stuff is facing forward. The green stuff is facing up. The red stuff is facing down, or rather, the green stuff is facing that way. Red stuff facing that way. So you can see how this is like a, light green is there, dark green is there, light red is there, dark red is there. So it's telling the pixels to face a different direction. So then you create this brick illusion, this illusion of a brick texture by having the pixels face this different ways. So I think this is a good way to illustrate how this stuff works. But with more complex shapes like this, it's really difficult to design this on your own. You kind of need a specialized program to do this stuff. Anyway, world position offset. The world position offset input allows for the vertices of a mesh to be manipulated in world space by the material. This is useful for making objects move, change shape, rotate, and a variety of other effects. This is useful for things like ambient animation. The above network will cause your object to simultaneously spiral and wave up and down like it's dancing. Caution: when using world position offset to expand your object beyond its original bounds, keep in mind that the renderer still uses those original bounds. This means that you may see culling and shadowing errors. You may go into the properties of a mesh and set its scale bounds property to compensate. Although this has a draw on performance and may lead to shadowing errors, my bad. This seems overly complicated. I'm not gonna, well, maybe I should. Should I try to decipher this whole thing? So this, I guess, you can use to create. So this is, instead of animating a mesh, you can just animate the material to make it look like it's animating the mesh. World position offset mask 0.2 time 1.3 multiply that added time multiplied by time sine cosine 3 multiply by 300 append to that world position offset. So over time, it does the sine and cosine, which is a wave. So it turns the time into a wave function. and then it puts it into position offset so that it moves back and forth. This seems okay, but is it better or worse than just animating the mesh? Making objects move, change shape, rotate, and a variety of other effects. World position offset. Why would you do that? Why would you do that through the material is what I'm trying to figure out. Why would you world position offset? Maybe flame effects, or potentially water effects. Potentially water effects. But would you do it again? Would you do it here, or would you do it by mesh? Maybe water effects. You would do it in materials. I don't know. Why would you do this? World position offset. Unreal world position offset. Why? Why? Oh, that's fascinating. So you can offset the entire thing. You can offset from the normal of the surface. This is animated. So you can just make this, like, make a ball thing bounce up and down by offsetting. It doesn't say why though. It doesn't tell you why you would want to do this. World position offset. I guess you can make like in some instances you can make animation effects that are much harder than with meshes. Right? I can imagine if you try and turn this into this with meshes, like make something like grow and shrink, it'll be more difficult with meshes than with just a texture. Maybe like a fleshy effect, like bulging muscles, flexing. So instead of having a mesh flexing up and down, you would just have the material offset flexing up and down. Maybe we should try this. I mean, I can kind of imagine how some of this might be useful. Possibly. All right. World displacement and tessellation multiplier. World displacement works very much like world position offset, but it uses tessellation vertices rather than the base vertices of the mesh. In order for this to be enabled, the tessellation property on the material must be set to something other than none. So world displacement, instead of just having the material look like it's changing shape, it actually changes the shape of the mesh based on the displacement map. Tessellation Multiplier controls the amount of tessellation along the surface, allowing more detail to be added where needed. As with world displacement, for this to be enabled, the tessellation property must be set to something other than none. When using world displacement to expand your object beyond its original bounds, keep in mind that the renderer still uses those original bounds. This means you may see culling and shadowing errors. You may go into properties of a mesh and set its scale bounds property to compensate. Though this is a draw on performance, it may lead to shadowing errors. So this actually changes the shape of the mesh, but it requires tessellation. And so basically you're just adding a lot of triangles. You're basically just adding a lot of triangles to your object in order to do this. Subsurface color. This is a pretty abstract stuff. The subsurface color input is only enabled when the shading model property is set to subsurface. This input allows you to add a color to your material to simulate shifts in color when light passes through the surface. For instance, human characters might have a red subsurface color on their skin to simulate blood beneath the surface. So subsurface color, like, it's hard to tell what it actually does, but when light hits it at certain angles, it will show the subsurface color. So the best way to think about this is like a translucent material, maybe like a candle, or like a piece of soap, or honey. I think honey counts. So there's kind of it's like a translucent thing, and there's color within the object, and so when the light hits it at certain angles, you would see that color. Here, the subsurface is red, and to be honest, I'm not entirely sure where the red is showing. Like, you look at this, and you don't really see any red. Like, where? Like, this is the subsurface color down here, like red. Where on earth? Oh, is it back here? Is that where it is? I think that's where it is. Inside. So inside the light there, you can see the red. I think that's what it's meant to be. And so again, it's subsurface. It's supposed to simulate subsurface scattering, and so the light coming through the object becomes red, a red color, when it goes through the object. I think that's what it is supposed to be. Not really sure though. Really not sure though. Interpolate, base color, so this kind of marbling effect, roughness. Why would... Alright, the roughness is also interpolated, alright. And then, yeah, the red stuff is underneath there, I think is what it is. And maybe there's a bit of red down here too, I'm not sure. Ambient Occlusion. Ambient Occlusion is used to help simulate the self-shadowing that happens when crevices of a surface, within the crevices of a surface. Generally, this input will be connected to an AO map of some type, which is often created within 3D modeling packages such as Maya 3ds Max or ZBrush. So, like the normal mapping, the ambient occlusion mapping will be done from a different 3D modeling software, and like pre-rendered. It will take a high detail mesh, and it will calculate the normal map and the AO map from the high detail model, and then you can apply those maps onto a low detail model, and it will simulate the details of the high detail model on the low detail model, if that makes sense. Again, it's something that we're probably not going to do much with ourselves. Refraction. The refraction input takes in a texture or value that simulates the index of refraction of the surface. This is useful for things like glass and water, which reflect light that passes through them. 0.5 opacity, 0 roughness, 1 base color and metallic. Refraction interpolates between 1 and 1.4 on the alpha. Cheap contrast bright. Cheap contrast dark, use cheap contrast, power, but there's no input. Like there's Fresnel, but there's no inputs on the Fresnel. Just the output. 1.2 would be something like plastic, I think. But common indices of refraction is, water is 1.33, glass is 1.52, and so you get the refraction there, which is cool. Alright. Clear coat. The clear coat shading model can be used to better simulate multi-layer materials that have a thin translucent layer of film over the surface of the material. In addition to this, the clear coat shading model can also be used with either metal or non-metal surfaces. In fact, it was specifically designed to model this second class of smooth colored films over a non-colored metal. Some examples of clear coat materials include acrylic or lacquer clear coats, and colored films over metal such as soda cans or car paint. Right. So there's a texture. There's a base color texture. It's a blue and white on the base color, and then there's a little bit of roughness, and then there's one clear coat. Alright, so the roughness of the stuff underneath is different from the roughness of the clear coat on top. So you see how this bright spot there, this is the specular of the clear coat. And then the roughness of the stuff underneath is different thing. So it looks like there's like a lacquer or acrylic over the other stuff underneath. Alright. The clear coat shading model opens up two new material inputs in the main material node, clear coat. Amount of clear coat layer. 0 acts like a standard shading model. 1 is the full clear cut model. This is useful for masking. Right. So you can have a clear coat mask. I mean, this book that I showed you earlier, this probably should be a clear coat, because that reflection should be a clear coat mask on the book, I think. Clear coat roughness for the clear coat layer. Our approximation is accurate for small values. Very rough clear coat layers are supported but will not be very accurate compared to their real world counterparts. Okay, so it'll be strange, but you can try it, but it will look strange. So those are all the material things. I want to play with emissive color immediately. I really do. Alright, what else should we read? Material properties. This document breaks down the properties available on a material. These properties are accessed by selecting the main material node in the material editor. What? So if I go to code hook. Oh, here, material properties. Oh, wait. You can use with mesh particles, no tessellation. So there's even more stuff. Translucency, screen space, material subsurface, translucency, self-shadowing. Alright, so there's more properties down here. Oh, wait, the hook it's got a normal map on it, huh? Okay, but why? Alright, so the code hook has a normal map on it. Texture sample, add clamp, multiply into the base color, right? I mean, you can kind of see some screws on the hook and all that. That's really, really detailed. Where is the code hook, and why is it so? Is it that thing? Oh, I see. It's this thing. So the mesh. I'm trying to take a close look at it. So there's the code hook. and it's super detailed. it's the whole that's super detailed. Materials, right? So properties inside material. The base material node has a number of properties which affect how the material behaves. These properties are described below, with each category divided into its own document section and presented in the order in which they appear in the properties menu. Panel, I mean. Physical material. Physical material none. Property physics. Physical material. The physical material associated with this material. Physical materials provide a definition of physics properties, such as how much energy will be retained on collision, bounciness, and other physics-based aspects. A physics material has no influence on how a material appears visually. Right. So you can define physics properties as materials. So like a rubber ball will be different from a metal ball, and you can just define the properties of those. And here, there's none here, and there's none there either. Base path shader with static lighting, 120 instructions. Dynamic lighting, 94 instructions. Vertex shader, 31 instructions. Texture samplers, 5 out of 16. So this tells you how complex the material is, right? 120 instructions. It takes 120 instructions to process this code hook. If we look at something else, the code hook back. This thing takes 116 instructions. But why? Why is it so complex? Why do you do so much math? Why even? Alright, so there's wood, multiply. The wood, okay, there's color multiplied by the wood. And then additionally multiplied by, oh, this is like a height map. This, but it doesn't go anywhere. It just goes to, wait, these don't go anywhere. 0, that goes to interpolate into roughness. No, seriously, these things don't go anywhere. These nodes. Multiply power. It becomes that. Alright, so this is not in the mesh. This shape is not in the mesh. This shape is or is it? No, that is in the mesh. Roughness. Why would you have? I thought you would use like the offset to do that. I think this is what that's meant to be, but it's not used. I don't know. That's the strangest thing. Material domain. This setting allows you to designate how this material is going to be used. Certain material uses, such as decals, require additional instructions for the rendering engines to consider. Because of this, it's important to designate the material as being used for those cases. Material domain includes the following options. Surface. This setting defines the material as something that will be used on an object surface. As such, this is the setting that you will use most of the time. Deferred decal. When you're making a decal material, you use this setting. Light function. Create a material for use with a light function. Post-process. I don't even... So is this something you put on the screen? Oh, it is. A post-process material applies to the screen, I believe. I mean, it's very interesting. Unbound post-process volume material instant red set to 0.75. So this is makes your screen red. Blend radius of 1000. Volume material instant screen set to 0.75. This just makes your camera green. Very interesting. Very interesting. We get outlines, except there's no outline on the sphere for some reason. Holy crap, this is complicated. You can even put code there. Wow. Alright. Blend mode. Blend mode describes how the output of the current material will blend over what is already being drawn in the background. Put more technically, allows you to control how the engine will combine this material, source color, with what is already in the frame buffer, destination color, when rendered. The available blending modes are opaque, final color equals source color. This means the material will draw on top of the background. This blend mode is compatible with lighting. Masked. This blend mode is... Wait, source color if opacity mask is greater than opacity mask clip volume, otherwise pixel is discarded. Translucent. Opacity plus destination color 1 minus opacity. Blend mode not compatible with dynamic lighting. Additive. Modulate multiplies source color multiplied by destination color. Weird. Not compatible with dynamic lighting or fog unless it's a decal material. Opaque, masked. So masked, if it's masked, it means that under certain conditions it might just disappear. Source color, final color equals source color if opacity mask is greater than opacity mask clip volume. Alright. Opaque, masked, translucent. Blend nodes documentation. Man, this is complicated. Decal blend node defines how two G-buffer channels are getting manipulated by decal material pass. Don't know what that means. Decal response. Oh, decal blend mode. Okay. Decal response. This defines how the material reacts on debuffer decals, affects look performance and texture sample usage. Non-debuffer decals can be disabled on the primitive static mesh. Shading model. Shading models determine how material inputs, emissive, diffuse, specular, normal, are combined to make the final color. Unlit. The material is defined by the emissive and opacity inputs only. It does not respond to light. Unlit textures do not respond to light. So the good thing about this is that you can use it, for example, to make a full bright material, no matter what the surrounding thing is. So it's got a constant brightness, no matter what the lights are. So if you want a thing to be unaffected by light, you'll be unlit. Unlit doesn't mean that it's dark, because if you have like a white box and it's unlit, so if you put a white box in a dark room with no light in it, it's still black, you can't see it. But if you put an unlit white box in the dark room, it would just be a white cube sitting in the black space, because it's not affected by light. Sometimes useful. Back in the old days, before we have emissive color, we would use unlit objects for things that are self-lit. So things like a neon light, for example, will be unlit and full bright, so that no matter what the external colors are, it will look like it's glowing with its own light. But because it doesn't have an emissive color, it doesn't actually add light to the world, it's just fully lit itself. So it's a way to kind of it's a bad way. It's not a very sophisticated way of simulating things like neon lights. I guess we don't use this anymore. I guess we use emissive color now. Subsurface, used for subsurface scattering materials such as wax and ice. Activates subsurface color input. Subsurface scattering, like this is always like it's been around for a while, and it's always, to me, it always seems like a really subtle effect. A really computationally expensive but subtle effect. So you can barely tell it's there, but it's really complicated. We just go subsurface scattering, and maybe I'm wrong. So this is what they mean by subsurface scattering, is that the light shines through the object and you can see the light going through. Like here we see the blender monkey. So the subsurface scattering, the light shines through the blender monkey, and this color, it glows behind it. And so what I keep thinking is that it's not something you notice very often. So look at this. This, for example, on the left side, there's no subsurface scattering. So this one, there's no subsurface scattering. This one, there is. And the question I would ask is, what the hell is the difference? You can I mean, if you look really closely, you can see that the one on the right-hand side is slightly more realistic. But the effect is so subtle. Look at it. The effect is just so subtle. I mean, yes, it does. It looks better. The one on the left looks a little more plastic than the one on the right. It does. I mean, it looks faker. It looks like the contrast is too high. But I keep thinking in my mind that it's a really complex thing for a very subtle effect. And this image really shows what I mean by that. Like, the effect is so subtle. Like, if you just kind of sit back and look at it from like 2 meters away, you don't even notice. You have to really look close to see the importance of subsurface scattering. Like, I mean, like every example they show you is like, it's so subtle. It really is so subtle. I mean, with this Jade Dragon, for example, like when the light hits it just right, then it's noticeable. It's so subtle though. Like in most, like they keep showing you the human skin, and I get it, all right, like I get it. But in every example they show you, it's super subtle, right? And that's the part that really amuses me. It's like all these examples they show you. Look at the difference. And what difference? What difference? What difference? Standard alloy shader, subsurface scattering skin alloy shader. I mean, it's a little different. It's a little bit different, sure. I know. Maybe I'm just old school or something. I don't know. Maybe I don't buy the hype, is what I'm trying to say. I know there's a difference. I do know there's a difference. It's just super subtle, man. It's super subtle. It's like the math is so complex. Like if you read the papers, the math papers on this stuff, it's like it's so complex. And then you look at the result, it's like, wait, you did all that math? for this. Anyway, I'm gonna stop laughing at people who are smarter than me.